We got one person. Awesome. Cool.
It's a crowd. It's a
It's a
party.
crowd. Without further ado, I'll give you this introduction. So, I'm very proud and pleased to have my dear friend Dave Henley today as my first guest. And Dave, in my eyes, is a multi accomplished human being. The first time I heard about what he does, probably a big question mark like started floating above above my head. So Dave's got BSc in physics, postgraduate diploma in sustainability and energy studies. Dave has extensively traveled overseas, pursuing his passion for cycling, climbing mountains, creating music. And in 2016, he started a master's in systems thinking to explore how we can transition as a human family to a sustainable and regenerative society in 21st century, working with a New Zealand organization called The Connective. He has been trying to shift the way we as a nation develop and invest in a regenerative and sustainable model as opposed to the older, more extractive and damaging ways we have been practicing. He's been meeting with a handful of leaders around the world in an attempt to bring some of these fresh new concepts to our New Zealand government to reimagine what is possible. And his mission to change our world to a better place, as I often refer to him. Dave was responsible for bringing the renowned Third Industrial Revolution documentary, also known as the Rifkin Documentary, to Queenstown, following the local community interest in later screened with a full house for 3 times in Wanaka Paradiso Cinema. So if you missed it, you probably should catch up on that. Stoked to have you as my first guest. I can't say it enough, Dave. I've said it in personal. Here's the man himself, Dave Henley.
Crikey. Hi, Pedro. Kia ora, everybody.
Welcome,
And
brother.
it's an honour to be your one of your first guests or your first guest, and I'm stoked that your vision for this project is now underway. Well done.
Thank you. I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my side, but it's all good. I'm wondering how people are listening to us and if they can hear us all right. So I can see us live there, so he's looking good. Oh, can you say something?
Me?
Oh, good.
Yes,
Gosh,
I can.
like for a second, it's just like I skipped a heartbeat again. Yeah, welcome, brother. To the answer is 42.
Excellent.
So without further ado, I got the main question. Let's go straight into it. Can systems thinking save the world?
Yes, can systems thinking save the world? If I had to say yes or no, I'd say yes, it can. But of course, there's massive caveats with
Good.
that. But yeah, I think absolutely systems thinking is a
That's
huge part of our collective journey right now on the planet, which is, even more in focus because of what we're going through collectively with COVID, etc. But essentially, my short answer is yes, it can certainly have a big part to play in saving the world or
great.
exploring the
That's
next part of the
exactly what I
adventure.
wanted to know,
Hmm.
which means that the rest of the conversation makes total sense. Um, so let's unpack that as much as we can. And I mean, start to tell me like how you're feeling in the middle of all this craze. Personally as a human being, before we jump in, and just in a simple form.
Yeah. So it's a really, well, first of all, I think everyone's experience is really different depending on what circumstance we find ourselves in. There's like a collective, I think, awareness that something big's happening and something really different suddenly come upon us. But my little bubble where I am has actually been a really amazing week. Community has sprung up. I'm staying in a house of 5 people, and we've got a big study group going and a work crew, and we've been exercising, moving our bodies and everything. And hearing the birds and everything's it's like a collective breath has been taken by the neighbourhood. But at the same time, there's people facing real uncertainty and, don't know if they're going to keep their home and their jobs. So it's very odd for both those things to be happening at the same time. And I think this whole moment's full of contrast, right? So there's connections happening more than ever with people reaching out to each other at the same time as we're having to pull apart and not physically be in the same place. And we're looking inwards within our countries at the same time as looking outwards as a global community. So acknowledging that this is a really tough time for people, and there's actually people losing loved ones, and this is quite serious, obviously. It's also a phenomenal moment, and in terms of someone who's like lots of us who are interested in how do we journey through, how do we shift as a humanity to a more sustainable, regenerative place, then there's obviously massive potential in moments like this where we step back and rethink and are forced to loosen our roots and of what we think reality is. So it's a sort of garbled way of saying it's quite an exciting moment if I look at the optimistic lens of it, for sure.
That's cool.
As well as all the issues.
I think they'll tie down with some of what we talked before, and just explore that later on. Cool. I mean, let's get into it. Like, what I googled systems thinking. Wikipedia came up with this description. I don't know if you've seen it or not.
Yeah, I had a quick look.
Yeah, systems thinking is an holistic approach to an analysis that focuses on the way that systems constituent parts interrelate and how systems work over time and within the context of larger systems. So, what
is it?
I mean, it's what is it exactly? Like, break it down for everyone. Me and you had a couple of chats about this topic in the past. I'm super interested in it, but explain us, what is it?
Well, at its simplest level, systems thinking is just something we probably already all do instinctively to a point. Essentially, it's a way of looking at the world. And it's not a science, it's an art. It's a science and an art. It kind of mixes together because it requires a lot of creativity, and it requires you to hold things with uncertainty. And because the world is messy and complex, right? In reality, we know that. We humans like really clear answers. We like certainty. We like to know, here's the problem, here's how we fix it, now it's solved. That works well, and it's really effective engineering-wise. It's really good, but it's a linear way of thinking. Turns out the world works in circles, basically. So systems thinking is about seeing the world. My aha moment, basically, when I first read this book on systems thinking was understanding that you see the world in circles, and looking at the city of Auckland at the time I was in, and I suddenly saw circles everywhere. What I mean by that is often an action will lead to something happening. So, for example, a classic example is roading. If you're concerned about lots of traffic and congestion, you build another lane. So that leads to faster travel time, and it makes the road more attractive to people who like driving. So more people drive, and then the lane fills up. So you've got congestion again. So it's just a circular loop, very simple example of a feedback loop there. And you're back to where you started, even though you've taken some action which you think would solve the problem. So that's seeing the circle. Now you put 3 or 4 circles together, or 3 or 4 interaction loops like that, and you start to get a complex story starting to emerge of what's going on. And it turns out the human brain can't cope with about 3 or 4 of those loops at the same time before we don't understand what's happening. So systems thinking is a way to look at everything, see the connections between it, the interactions, and start to think about how do we go about thinking about this in a complex way. So we have a whole lot of tools that enable us to think about how those loops all link together and how they affect each other.
Right.
Moving from linear, basically.
I mean, one thing that kind of strikes me is I'm, as you know, a sort of very creative person, and I consider myself in general, but I also come from a background of engineering. That was my life before. So, I mean, what's the difficulty in selling that idea of looking at the world to people that are in power positions and in decision-making positions? Like, how difficult is it, and are you finding ways to do that? Has it been somehow accepted? And well, it's been so I'm still massively on the learning curve of this whole journey myself as well. So totally consider myself a student of the discipline. But what's really exciting is that the last 3 or 4 years, the business world, the political world, etc., seems to be talking about systems thinking and big picture, joined up thinking is something that
is of huge interest without really knowing quite how to do it. So we're all kind of working that out a little bit still together.
Right.
But an example of that would be, and why it's been resisted is because it's hard and because it's messy and because it's hard to do cleanly. So
It's hard to what? Sorry?
it's hard to do it. Basically, people are, if you're an engineer, for example, you want to know exactly what the tonnage that a certain beam can take, and you want to know what the effect is going to be and the cost is going to be, etc. You want exact precision.
Right.
And systems thinking gives you more insight, but often gives you more uncertainty as well. That's the irony of it, because one of the things you learn, one of the gifts of systems thinking actually is it enables you to see and sit in uncomfortable places with uncertainty, but still move forward in that position. So you might have more information than you did before, but it might not be as crisp because you're revealing this complex system.
Right, get you.
It's a less bad approach. Like, you're incrementally trying to understand the world better and better and better. And the great trap of anybody doing this, whether it's in systems thinking or anything else, is that you can go, aha, now I understand the world, or what your problem is, when actually you don't. You just know a little bit more about it. Yeah.
Like, I mean, tell us, and I think that's the difficult part. Like, you kind of explain a little bit what it is, and like a way of looking at the world in a different way, where you look at the all the different parts, I guess, in opposition to a more linear or sort of mathematical approach of probably looking at a few things. And I mean, just tell us how does it work?
Okay.
How do you apply this? How do we do a systems thinking? Maybe give us an example,
So
and then explain what's the process.
Going ski touring, which in the mountains, and we both have an image of our heads of what the day is going to look like.
Right.
So we might not even know ourselves what we're actually thinking, because there's subconscious things going on as well. If we had to draw out a picture of what we were thinking in our heads about a situation, say we're looking at the same slope and trying to say, is this worth skiing? Is it not? Is it going to be fun? Is it not? What's the risk? What are the different factors playing into avalanche conditions, etc.? We'd probably have two different pictures in our heads to start with. So the first step in systems thinking is to actually draw out what we're thinking as best we can. So we might draw a picture of how we think our actions will affect the environment we're in, how we think the weather is affecting that environment, how we think the relationship between you and me is affecting our decision making. There'll be a whole lot of things feeding into the dynamics of that day.
Right.
So if we both drew a picture of that and then compared them, straight away we'd understand how each other is thinking a bit more. So it'll give us some benefits. And then we'd build a collective image of how we're thinking about the day, so we can actually understand each other more. So imagine this in a town planning situation like Wanaka's trying to become more sustainable. If the sustainability champions are thinking one way and another group's thinking a different way, but they don't realize it, or they can't come to some shared picture of the world or the Wanaka town that they're talking about, that's going to be a huge, difficult space to be even having a conversation in the first place. So first step, draw a picture together of how you're thinking that Wanaka works.
So do you do that as a single person, or do you do that as a group? Can you do that by one person, or can you do that like as a collective, or how does it work?
You can do it both. So the most powerful learning experience is for the group as a whole to tease out their thoughts. So maybe you have the people who are experts at the water system drawing out how the water system works in their mind, and then you have the people who are experts in the education system drawing out the education system and how that affects itself. And then when you bring those two people together, you have a conversation and you understand. So when the water runs out of the taps, how does it help the kids at school? Does it get them, it means they can drink, and therefore they're going to be better at learning, and that means they're going to be better engineers to look after the water system in years to come. So those two systems are linked, for example.
Right.
So it's really useful that systems thinking is really useful at bringing different disciplines together and giving them a common language where they can understand how they link. And one of the things I should have said earlier is that one of the big things is about the boundaries we put around different areas in our world. So there'll be the water system and the education system, and then the health system, and mental protection agency, and they're all separate. We know that they connect and influence each other, but we often don't think of them in that sort of nuanced way. So when you bring systems thinking into the mix, you can help bridge some of those gaps, because the world is a connected whole. It's not separate boxes everywhere.
Okay.
So you get that picture clear in your head, build a better picture of how maybe two parts of the world you haven't thought of, like the education and the water system, are actually connected. And then you might see opportunities to improve that system so that it is mutually beneficial to both the education and the water system of the town, for example.
Right. Okay. I think that kind of gives us sort of an overall idea. It's still like it's really a different thing, concept to kind of grasp in general, and I think even for me, I've been going with conversations with you for a while, and it's hard. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this, and to just give more people the opportunity to understand a little bit better what this is.
I'll just say there's a spectrum. Like there's at the very simplest level, it's drawing on a bit of paper, or thinking and drawing on a bit of paper how you see a situation, and then looking for opportunities where there might be feedback loops. So where an action actually affects something that eventually leads back to itself. So the example I gave before was the roading one. Congestion leads to pressure to build more roads, so you widen the road, which leads to a more attractive driving experience because it's there's less traffic, which leads to more people driving, which leads to more congestion again. So your action to solve a problem leads to the problem getting worse as opposed to getting better. So that's the end of it. Then you can build really complex models which try and fold in more and more of these feedback loops, and it's impossible for the brain to see that. So we can then use computers to help explore that interconnected web and see if we change some of those connections or add in new connections or intervene or in different ways, what might happen and how we might get a better result that we actually want and desire, rather than whatever the system's producing.
Cool. Right. I mean, in the current sort of context, or in the current sort of climate we're living in with COVID-19, and I mean that's kind of what triggered this whole thing, and I'm super interested in knowing how is that affecting your world in this case. I mean, maybe not so much on a personal level, but what are you seeing out there? Is systems thinking could be something that is used to sort of to help solve this problem, even the current immediate problem and probably the long-term problem. Have you heard anything about? Is anything changed in what you're seeing out there in the industry or in whatever world you're involved with systems thinking?
I mean, it's a really, well, for a start, like one of the main risks of climate change is an increase in pandemics, or main risks of biodiversity loss, etc. So an effect of burning fossil fuels in a roaring economy, as we've done it in the 20th century, has been eating up lots of biodiversity areas, and then animals not having as much habitat to exist in, and then more contact with humans potentially being in the case, which can lead to pandemics, which can lead to global shutdown of the economy, and which can lead to the situation we're in now, which for the old model of economy is a disaster, but it gives the opportunity for a new model to be established now. So in terms of systems thinking, absolutely, there's a huge amount of, and just in transition thinking generally, there's a huge amount of talk happening about like, what does this recovery look like? We're going to spend billions of dollars on infrastructure and job creation, and there's ideas like universal basic income and like quite radical shifts in how we think about supporting our society collectively. So getting this right, or getting this on a different track, and introducing like solutions that actually are going to build our resilience and build ourselves a regenerative world are massive. And then you look at the community effects of this as well. So the opportunities for people to spend, take a breath, have something radical happen, like be isolated in your house with your family and loved ones for a time, to recalibrate how we're thinking about how do we really want to live here. Do we want to be working 100 hours a week to pay our mortgage, and et cetera, is that the model of society we want to build together? Or do we want to design something a bit more smart and
well, let's unpack that a little bit. I mean, what do you suggest we do as individuals that can somehow support that? I mean, I'm at home with a family, as you know, and so are the rest of the world. The ones that have a house and are lucky enough to have a roof, and for the ones of us a bit more privileged that have the ability to be on a little show like this or reading information on the internet. I mean, be more specific. What should I do on a daily basis? How can I do that? Guide me through that process of reflection, and what would you suggest to people?
I always think of it when I'm listening to interviews of other people. I always think about or conversations. That what do I do question is something we really yearn for, because it's so you want to know a concrete answer so you can take action. What comes to mind first of all is, I'll go through a few things, but one is just like allowing the roots to loosen a little bit here. So I think we're all in a bit of shock right now, and some ideas that have seemed pretty solid in the way the world we knew was working may or may not return to some lesser extent. So just like getting comfortable with that uncertainty and still being able to function, I think is like something we can all cultivate right now. Because there's some, we're going to have to radically rethink the way, and this is emerging, like the way our global system works if we're going to deal with climate change and all these other huge challenges. So first of all, just like on a personal note, cultivating our ability to sit with uncertainty, to sit with things we thought were normal and solid becoming less so. And that's happened throughout history, but I guess we've had a pretty concrete time. So that's one thing. Obviously, considering what choices we all make in terms of, are we living in an impactful way that we want to? Are we buying into a system too much? We've obviously got to play the game a little bit, of course, a huge amount, but are there things we could do that would reduce the consumption we are all making, that would offer more wholesome support to our friends and families and more rich connections? So this is a time for reflection. We can think about that. And obviously, like right now, I've learned more about my neighbourhood in the last week than I have in the last 3 months, because I'm paying attention to it. And then on a political scale, it's like, for example, there's ideas that have taken root now in Europe and have been around for a while, things like the Green New Deal. So that's a concept of the role the state and the private sector can play together to really radically rebuild the infrastructure we have. So shifting from centralized fossil fuel power to decentralized renewable energy, for example, where we're obviously regenerating energy from renewable sources, but we're also changing the ownership structure of it and allowing communities to be empowered through that. So how do we individually play a role in that? Well, we start to listen to those ideas, we start to talk with our friends about them, we give them political support and voice, we give our leaders space for that, we participate in conversations on the radio, on the TV, on Facebook, on social media, and I think that's, so one of the huge things I think is getting a solid narrative that we can rally around about what is a picture of this world we're trying to nudge towards at the moment. And I think something like Green New Deal, which is an idea that is being voiced a lot in the United States and in Europe. And Jeremy Rifkin has just written a book called The Green New Deal as well, referring to the documentary before. Getting that more crystallized collectively would be really helpful. And because also like it's about creative, optimistic things. It's about rather than framing this is a huge thing we could all do as well. Stop framing climate change as a disaster. It is.
Right.
It is really scary. Right. And it is really horrific. Absolutely. Feel that, own that, take that on. And then I just think, put our adventurous caps on. When we're climbing a mountain, or when you're jumping in the ocean, or when you're going skateboarding, or when you're running with your kid, whatever it is, you've got an adventurous spirit going on, and a creative spirit, and that is so much more powerful, and so and fun and necessary. So I think if we can be real about the danger and the impact, but then see this with excitement and purpose, like we have an opportunity to be the generation or part of a generation on an incredible adventure to reimagine our communities, our civilization, and take a real step in a much more exciting direction. And straight away that opens up potential and excitement and purpose for all of us. So loosen up the roots.
No, I mean, so you're suggesting that somehow we look at the challenges ahead and look at it, I mean, I guess with a sense of converting the challenge into, I guess, an opportunity, and from an adventure sort of spirit point of view. I mean, like, I guess embracing whatever change comes our way, and I guess embracing the journey there will be to adapt to that. I guess that's what adventure is in a way for me, which is the unknown and the uncertain outcome of every pursuit. I mean, you mentioned the Rifkin documentary, or the third industrial revolution, is it correct? I mean, for people that haven't watched it, like, how would you summarize that? What are the main bullet points out of that we should sort of all be aware of as a society?
Yeah, sure. So Jeremy Rifkin's a economist and human, I call him, as in that. Sorry, that sounds weird, but what I mean is he gets it at a pretty awesome level as well. Like what am I trying to say? The first
Rifkin?
time I came across him, I was like captured because he talked about the empathetic civilization. That was another one of his books, and he was basically saying, essentially, humanity is an amazingly empathetic species, and that is our strength. Yes, we're competitive with each other, but what really defines us is our ability to cooperate, our ability to be empathetic.
Right.
And he was sensitive to that. He was sensitive to the natural world. But he also talked the language of hard and fast economics, and sort of could bridge those two gaps. So he's got a real vision about how we might move from a 20th century economy to a 21st century regenerative society. And the third industrial revolution is basically a description of what are the underpinning infrastructures and worlds and ideas that actually generate the behavior we see in our society. So what I mean by that is, for example, let's go to the example I just mentioned before, centralized fossil fuel generation.
Yeah.
If that's how we make power, for example, which has been really served us well in the 20th century in terms of generating electricity and all the rest, what sort of world does that suit and support? Well, it suits a world that you have big organizations which can extract oil or fossil fuels and transport it and process it, and you need a big vertical structured organization to do that well. Right?
Yeah.
If you had distributed renewable energy, you could have that on every rooftop. Every small community could be cooperatively owning this sort of stuff. And that's exactly what's happening in Germany now, where nearly 90% of the new renewables in Germany are owned by cooperatives and small communities. So the way you finance those two worlds looks different. The way you feel about it, those two worlds, is different. And that's emerged from the laws and the ideas and the technologies underneath the economy. So he's talking about what are the things that are emerging already, and what are the things we could help accelerate to start to enable this third industrial revolution to grow. The reason it's the third is because the first was based on coal and steam. It talks about the convergence of the energy source we use, the communication source we have, and the way we move around. Essentially, when those three things change to a different mode and they combine, you get a whole new sort of type of society, because it changes the way we interact and move. It changes the way we think, changes the laws we write to suit this new infrastructure and built environment, and it changes how we feel and how we connect with how we feel. So essentially we're on the dawn, or going into this, what he calls the third industrial revolution, with distributed renewable energy, the internet, and electrified transport as the sort of base pins underneath a new way of living. And that enables a whole lot of space for realigning ourselves with the planet as well. And that's not to even touch on the spirituality and all those elements as well, which are obviously a huge part of it. Yeah.
Cool.
Mm.
Hey, last week you shared with me a super interesting article from Sam McGlennon,
Mm-hmm.
Sam McGlennon on, I think it was Stuff or something like that, and the article was let's never return to normal, and this seems to be quite of a current right now where there's a lot of people talking about this. This is a great opportunity to move into a different. I mean, to be fair, I don't think we're going to return to a normal. It's just maybe that normal could be a more positive one than probably something trying to catch up on what it was before. The article actually said, like, as we enter lockdown today, we are unwrapping a once-in-a-generation opportunity for individual and collective reflection on the fundamental shape of our lives and our society. I mean, let's unpack this one. Like, do you think that as a society we're going to be able to do this? You know, is somehow systems thinking being used in places where this is kind of helping making this transition?
Yeah, so do I think we can?
Yeah.
Absolutely, I think we can. There's been comparisons made to the big shifts that happened after World War II and now. And one of the things that they mentioned was that it took 2 shocks for the world to fundamentally rearrange itself. And this is another article I was reading the other day, it was comparing it to the GFC, the global financial crisis in 2008. And the way we responded to that was to pretty much put band-aids over the financial system, not make any huge fundamental changes too much. And many see that as a big lost opportunity.
Right.
To, like, for example, the stimulus package was, the government's launched weren't really targeted at building a renewable energy infrastructure or reimagining how we, operate. Whereas this time around, that opportunity presents itself, and especially because it's even more of a shock. Is systems thinking playing a role? I would say yes, it is. How much it plays a role, I think, will have a huge impact on some of the results we get. So how much do we try and draw together the dots? If we're thinking about our communities and our economy and our power sources and the way we drive and operate, how much are we seeing the picture as a whole, or are we just dealing with it in parts and bits without considering how that's going to flow and affect other parts?
Yeah, I mean, that's great, but how are we going to achieve that when the world seems to be, broken in parts with all the countries and all the different cultures? Like, how can systems thinking help us, like, do that? Is it like is it because different countries are starting to buy into systems thinking, and systems thinking somehow like allow us to see the benefits of that, and then okay, we got to go that route? Or how are we selling that idea about we got to collaborate all together?
It's hard to say exactly how much people are thinking in a systems thinking lens or not. I think, again, already you're seeing massive collaboration at play. People are aware that this moment has shown us straight away we're a human global family, right? So straight away I felt personally more connected to everyone around the world. But then at the same time, as I said earlier, there's contrast going on. So there's barriers going up and nations doing their own things. But there's also this huge drive for collaboration. And if this isn't a lesson that can teach us that we're all in this together, I don't know what is. And so in terms of climate threats and biodiversity loss and all these other issues that don't care about borders, like, we only have one choice, and that's to collaborate. Yeah, I mean, it is. It's not guaranteed that that's what we'll choose, but it certainly is a necessary way to go.
I mean, I have both an optimistic and sometimes a less optimistic approach. I mean, I find that as human beings, we're naturally quite selfish in the way that it's really hard for people to see beyond their lifespan. Sometimes it's even hard to see beyond 10 or 20 years lifespan, and consider sort of the situation for your children or your grandchildren. But I mean, yeah, how do you get people to just feel that in their skin and to just want to change now? I guess this is a great way. What's happening now is making people feel in their skin what could what could happen in the immediate moment.
Yeah. I mean, how do you get people to change? I don't think you can't. You can offer stories that are optimistic or that highlight different energies or different focuses. I think that's huge. I found that really powerful myself. So reframing things like climate change, like a lot of business, for example, for the last 5-6 years talks in the language of risk. Now, when I'm going into the mountains, risk is something we think about, right? It's important. You've got to think about risk and manage it, but you don't frame your whole day in the mountains around risk. You frame it around adventure. And that, for example, I mean, you risk is a huge part of what you're considering, yes, but why are you out there? It's not to manage risk. It's to live, to play, to explore. So I think the stories and the way we frame them, I mean, I know it's a sort of woolly answer that doesn't give you a lot, but I think it's so crucial that we start to say, you know what, there are massive examples of people collaborating. There's a huge swelling of the world reaching out to each other and communicating and thinking about the big picture more than there has ever been in history right now. Right. That's happening. It's not just we're just a selfish community who just think of themselves in only 20 years at a time. Yeah, of course we have those elements within ourselves, and there are examples of that. But there's also examples of incredible cooperation, of vision, of people, these kind of conversations happening all over the internet right now. I would imagine, from what you dip in. It's very hard to tell what you can be exposed to a pretty big bubble of several million people, and you still don't know what the whole world's thinking. So I'm acknowledging that could be what's going on as well. But it seems to me that, I have a lot of hope because I see a lot of examples of people waking up to this sort of stuff and talking in terms of bigger than themselves and wanting to be purposeful. And you see younger generations and older generations thinking about these bigger issues, not because they, want to personally benefit from them, but like they want to be part of something that's meaningful and purposeful. So the fact that exists at all is worth remembering. What were you going to say? Sorry.
Well, I got a couple of comments coming in here, and of people. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your comments. Kevin Jarvis. Oh, Kevin. Hi, Kevin. And Fernando. And I mean, just one of the things they're talking about is like he's got to start with young kids, and I'm totally with that. I mean, in a way, I mean, as for me, I believe, and I want to believe that I will always pursue my sort of infinite curiosity of trying new things. And I mean, like I've done live stuff, but I've never certainly tried anything ambitious as this. And so that's kind of a product of curiosity and actually want to pursue things. But it is true that it's really hard, as you get older, to just allow that changes this comfort, and getting ourselves into that space of this comfort tends to really frighten a lot of people. So one of the things they're saying is like, we got to start with the youngsters in school. Like, who's leading this in the world? Who's the country that is certainly embracing this the most, and what sort of initiatives are you seeing? Or you've traveled in Europe and you went to the conference, and what does one learn at a conference, at an international worldwide conference of systems thinking? Like, who's setting the trends?
Just to answer you, or just to make a comment on that first point you were talking about, like it's got to start with kids. Totally agree. Like obviously, giving young minds the opportunity to explore the world in different ways rather than locking them into old ways of thinking is essential. Right. But I would also say, we can't wait for them to come and solve all the problems. Yes, we need to do multiple things at the same time. Like, we're here now. This is not something that's going to be a 30-year generational program. Yes, we need to also make sure we're rethinking education and the space and the way we bring up our tamariki and our kids, but like it's I don't mean it's an excuse, but we often say, oh well, our generation didn't do it well, so it's over to you guys, and I think that's a real well, it's a missed opportunity to have a lot of fun with our lives as much as anything, like to be part of. We have amazing talents at our generation. We are able to adapt our thinking, so we shouldn't sell ourselves short on that as well, and elders as well. So I think I talk about stage rather than age a lot, and I think we share this sort of playful spirit, Pedro, in terms of keeping that inner child alive, and I think again that adventurous spirit is what we need now. And going back to, like, yes, we do cling to the certainties we're used to, and it's hard to shift behaviours, and I think that's one of the things in this moment we need to all collectively cultivate. And one of the things I've actually been really impressed with around the conversation in the last 10 days is actually how mature the response has been, how quickly a lot of people have started to talk about what's most important, or accept our frailty, or accept that their house is going to be, they're going to be struggling for mortgage repayments quite quickly, surprisingly fast. And I've seen a lot of examples of people not clinging on as tightly as I might have expected to past ways, and I think that's a really good sign. Obviously, there's examples of other directions. In terms of worlds or places that are doing some interesting stuff, like one region I've been involved with is Rotterdam and The Hague, which is a region in the Netherlands of 2.3 million people. And there's a gentleman there called Jan Rotmans, who's a professor of transitions. And we've actually, just before COVID hit, we had him lined up to come up to New Zealand in July and meet with the government and leaders around the country and do some public events all about their transition plan. And one of the things at the core of that was reimagining education in their schooling system. And a lot of that was, at the university level, for example, was trying to remove the siloed pillared approach. So you wouldn't have the economics department and the physics and the biology. You'd have cross-disciplinary conversations going on in a much more rich way, so that we were really seeing problems in a more complex, holistic way. And systems thinking as a discipline and a tool is going to be taught at those universities to most people, because it's a way of seeing the world and helping give people the skills to join up the dots of what were held separately. So
you're saying that it's already being done at the university level?
Not much in New Zealand, no. I mean,
but in this area in Rotterdam.
Yeah. So Europe is far ahead in terms of its systems thinking approach, and it's already used in a lot of the policy visioning and that sort of thing. But specifically in terms of education for kids, for younger people, it's actually being in these regions which are pretty transformative and pretty pioneering on what they're doing. These particular ones I'm familiar with, specifically systems thinking is being introduced to the curriculum as something that is taught. It's a tool for thinking and to join up dots in the world. So
is this taught to everyone, in sort of from early school, or just for people that go into a specific sort of science side of studies?
I'm not sure exactly how it's being rolled out in the different regions. I suspect it's not across the entire curriculum, but it's certainly at universities. It'll be offered as a course increasingly. Right. But also the interest in the corporate investment world of systemic ideas and systems thinking is just going through the roof. Like every second report you see is like, we must take a systems view. We must, it's a whole realization that it's stuff we've already known. So,
are you seeing this being adopted by like big corporate companies? Is this something they're starting to integrate in? We're talking like sort of big level Fortune 500s and
Absolutely.
Things like that.
Yeah, to different degrees. Like there's some exemplar people really pushing the boundaries. Like the connective I'm working with is working. So the group I'm working with is working with some Māori organisations as well. So we're trying to integrate a tikanga Māori approach and a regenerative systems approach together. And then we're talking with some foundations and New Zealand corporates about how they can reimagine how they're investing to do good, basically, for the world. And what does that look like when we consider this whole set of outcomes? So rather than thinking oh, we just want to plant more forests. Well, how do you plant the forest? How does that affect the community nearby? How does that affect the stream that runs to the sea? How does that affect the education of the children in that area? And how does that interweave with cultural values that you want to enhance and give space to? So rather than just investing in this, how do we do something that might serve all those things at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of a note I had here from Sam's article. Like, he said, like, economically, it gives us a chance to start asking the big question. For example, what could we do with 500,000 people in need of employment? Could we start a thriving rooftop or community solar industry, or activate paid army of native bush regeners to start rehabilitating our whenua, or advance our ambitious pest-free agenda? This is quite specific to New Zealand, but I mean, this, I can't remember a lot of the stuff on the Third Industrial Revolution documentary, but what were the main points that kind of, how did Rifkin propose to solve a lot of these problems? Fernando asked here or mentioned, like, for example, 50% of the world's got no water, and I'm actually trying to bring someone on this podcast, on this show, that runs an organization in India I worked for. That basically, Pedro, he wrote me a message yesterday, and he was saying, Pedro, like, the problem in India is this is going to be really complicated. Only 36% of the population practices hand washing, and there's not enough water anyway to drink, let alone to wash your hands. How are you going to convince people you got to wash your hands when they don't even have water to drink? I mean, how does he propose to solve some of these, like, really big problems? Because I remember there is a part of it that it's sort of stroke something, like, in terms of, I remember, but I can't remember how we solved that problem. So what was the main solution there?
Well, one thing that just reminded me of was, like, when we did our Asia trip around the Himalayas, I remember cycling and becoming much more aware of the 7 great rivers that come flowing out of the Himalaya and essentially feed 4 billion people. So it's incredible. Like, this this one spot, this one beautiful mountain range, which is actually, and of course the Brahmaputra and the Ganges and all these sort of rivers coming through India and Bangladesh, billions, or literally 1 billion plus 2 billion people are relying on that source. So it's really crucial. Rifkin talked a lot about reimagining how we think about water. So one of the examples he thought was there's a huge relationship between energy and water in the Western world. So pumping water takes a lot of energy, and so you need water to generate electricity in a lot of places as well. So there's a whole lot of relationships going on that we hadn't really thought about, and increasingly we're trying to think about these two things at the same time now. That's an example of systems thinking, bringing two areas together we'd thought about separately often. And he talked a lot about resilience. And this comes down to regenerative thinking as well. So for years we thought of stormwater as a like when we designed our cities, as a waste issue to get rid of. We needed to drain it out and put it away. And now regenerative design is saying, this is a gift. Let's capture it on our rooftops. Let's put it in cisterns. Let's have innovative slow draining gardens which capture the rainwater and slow it down, and then can nourish plants and grow food in our cities. So again, a shift of the narrative, going from a challenge, like a problem to get rid of, to a potential to embrace through creative, adventurous design. And for example, with the distributed renewable electricity example, that can be, and that already is being offered to, or being grabbed by, grab's the wrong word, taken on by communities in India. It's a classic example where you can get very small scale micro solar going to generate electricity, which can also be used to.
Sorry to just
Go for it.
Interrupt you there, but, like, so is systems thinking and sustainability highly sort of interrelated? Does it mean that systems thinking often looks to sort of sustainability as a solution for sort of applying systems thinking to a system?
I think systems thinking is a way of thinking. It's a way of going from putting things in boxes that are separate and dealing with them in linear ways to joining up their dots and seeing them in circular ways in their feedback interactions. It can be used for anything. You could use it to understand how your household is getting on. You could use it to understand how your business is going. or you could apply it to an ecological forest, or you could apply it to humanity and civilization. So what I'm interested in using it for is this collective journey of moving to a more regenerative, sustainable society. And it definitely suits that, because it's all about the way we've thought about designing our economy and our world and the way we live for the last 150 years has been more based around linear, siloed thinking than it has about joining the dots together. And that's got us into a bit of grief. So that's why it's well suited with sustainability.
Right. Okay. So, one of the things, I mean, there's a lot of things in there. I mean, it's unfortunately we're not going to be able to fix the world in one talk. But I mean, I really hope this somehow, if this can convince one person listening to us, or maybe listening to this afterwards, that it's something to think about, something to talk with other people and get more conversations going. I think it's already worth my time and your time. I mean, as one of the things is funny that you're talking about, the reuse of stormwater. It's in India, the organization I went to work with, they got like 56 different ways of sort of recapturing water and helping sort of the natural systems of the world to sort of to keep replenished. And that's all they look at, and still they have all the problems they have. So it's kind of like it's almost like they're already applying systems thinking to a lot of their issues. I mean, for example, this organization is actually what they do, helping people harvesting water from the monsoons. So, for me, for example, like running a small business, or for someone running a medium business. What can people, because businesses have a high impact on the world. Let's face it, probably
Totally.
bigger than us as individuals. I mean, I'm a very small business, but for people that have 50, 100, 1,000 employees, or even like 10, like what can we do to sort of support this kind of movement of change into a better direction through the lens of systems thinking? Like, what would you recommend that I think of when I'm making decisions? I mean, I think it's almost like upgrading your core values, or sort of rethinking your core values in a way to see if they are aligned with that. What can I think? What can I do as a business owner or as a business leader in my department? Like to if I believe in this, to sort of make this part of what I defend and what I fight for in the world.
In terms of a regenerative, sustainable future, do you mean, or in terms of systems thinking?
In terms of both of them, but
Yeah.
basically in terms of transitioning to that hopefully better state after this whole thing is a story of the past, which I don't think we're ever going to go back to the normal we had, but it might be. I'm hoping it's a good normal. So how do we support that to transition to a better normal once we all get back to work, if we get back to work?
Well, I'm doing a course at the moment with a group called Regenesis, and they talk a lot about understanding what your business impacts quite clearly. What does it interact with on a daily basis? What people, what physical space? How do you affect that space with your actions? And that can be also including the field, not just the physical space, but like the field of cinematography or filmmaking or whatever it is you're doing. So really think about that and understand how your actions, or the business actions, the actions of your business, what does that flow in and do for your, we call it the proximate whole.
So,
and then, sorry.
I mean, let's break this. So I decided I wanted to do this as an idea. It's been going on for a long time, and I've never had time with doing work for clients, and I love sort of getting introduced to new ideas. And how do I apply that to, say, I had the thought of, I'm going to start this show. The answer is 42. And, like, how would I think about it in terms of if I'm about to do a project in work, or I'm sort of a manager for a big department, or how do I do that? Or I'm just the boss of a small company.
Yeah.
like let's apply it to this thing. I thought about this. How would
Mm-hmm.
you? What? Give me a couple of questions or concepts that I would have to think about before moving forward.
So I think the first thing is to take a breath, to take a step back, and just take a look at the whole picture as best you can of what you're actually doing. And like you said, you've had a chance to take a breath now and do something you've wanted to do for a long time. Now, is there ways you can build that capacity into every week so that you can actually stop regularly and do what you're doing now, as in, so like designing space for those crucial things to happen, which somehow don't happen for a long time because we're too busy. So put that at the top of the list, that there's space to do that. Secondly, really understand how your business is interacting, or your passion or your project is interacting with the world around it and the people that it impacts, and how it affects those people, and then what capacity that next level out can generate in the world at large. So your business is in physically in Wanaka at least, but obviously it can stretch across the whole world in terms of its impact. What people are directly touched, like there's people listening to this conversation and participating in it. There's people that will see your videos. What are their actions then lead on to? So then, is there ways that you could make a link between that other circle and your business as a whole? Is there people you could reach out to and connect with and redesign how you're approaching your business? But for a start, just drawing that picture out and understanding how those interactions are happening is a first thing to do, because you've probably got a fairly good idea about it, but I would imagine there'd be things you could discover that might be like, I hadn't thought about how this video actually connects with school kids, and my son goes to school, and maybe there's a way I could, wrap these two projects together, or different angles that you might see that you haven't seen before. So as a first step, that's what I would do.
Okay. Well, I would actually. I mean, I'm still trying to grasp how that process is done. I mean, we're you never know. We might do another one at some point if people want to hear more about this, or even for us. But
I think a work example would be really useful, like in terms of understanding what the hell does this actually look like.
Maybe we can dissect that on another talk one day. You can actually show us live an example. I mean, it might not even be done by you, but something a study that was done like in Rotterdam, or just explaining how they're applying those concepts would be really, really interesting. Yeah, so I mean, we're getting to a closure because it's already past the 1 hour, but we could probably be talking on this topic for a long time. Before I ask my final question, where can people find more information about this that you sort of support, and I guess that you believe is credible, and if it resonates with people? It's such a crazy world of stuff in the World Wide Web. Like, where can people find information that you would recommend them to check out? And just tell us, and we can put.
Sure. So I mean, first of all, there's a few. There's the Rifkin Documentary, Third Industrial Revolution. Definitely check that out. That's not strictly systems thinking, but it's about the transition and the journey of the human family. And another one called The Empathetic Civilization, which is a 10-minute TED Talk, which I really recommend for reframing this moment.
What was it called? Say again?
The Empathetic Civilization.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 10 minutes long. In terms of systems thinking, like the book that changed my life is a book by a woman called Donella Meadows, and it's called Systems Thinking, a Primer. And it really it's a very easy to read, accessible book. It's designed for people who have never come across systems thinking before. It clearly, much more clearly than I can articulate, spells out what systems thinking is and gives you some real sense of how it sees the world.
Right.
And I recommend that if anyone wants to dip into something with a bit of more depth, that's a great starting point. And there's also quite a lot of short articles that she's written on the Donella Meadows website, which I can get to. Yeah.
Is there like kind of any worldwide website or anyone that is kind of set up, like
Yeah, there's a bunch of
like a
cool.
United Nations sort of style of platform that kind of runs a lot of information on this.
There's multiple ones, but there's a one that I just came across my radar literally yesterday with a whole lot of systems tools and apps that you can download to start thinking about leverage points and how to map your own systems and that sort of thing. So I can definitely share
Okay.
that, which is a global project going on with a whole lot of different people.
I think that would be
Yeah,
really useful. I mean,
and they've
for
got
me or anyone that
education.
is in a leadership position to just, I mean, if they have a bit of time on their hands, so let me just have a look at how this would pan out on a system like this. Yeah.
And there's another one, a guy called Daniel Schmachtenberger, who talks about emergence a lot, and he talks about the future of civilization. Actually, I could start ranting all day about different people.
Okay,
Can pick
well, I
up these,
mean, feel
but
free to, if you drop a couple of those links in the comments on here on Facebook, that would be awesome, and I'll just compile them and copy them into the description of the video.
yeah,
And if anyone watches this in the future or is interested in following any of those links, they'll all be available.
cool.
Yeah, so this is my final question. Like, if you hit a billboard that every business in the world would read tomorrow, which, I mean, better yet, because no one's going out, so there's no billboards to be read at the moment. I mean, let's say you had a 15-30 minute video that the whole world was going to watch today. This is quite of a personal question. I mean, if you want to frame it from a systems thinking point of view, but I guess more from you, influenced by systems thinking and all your studies in sustainability, what would that video say? What would be the message?
Yeah, okay. Um,
No pressure.
no pressure. No, it's good. I like it. I like it a lot. Also, just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to do this. This is the first time I've had a interview, and it's been a real big learning experience for me as well. So
Likewise.
appreciate it. Lots to learn always, which is great. And thanks everyone for joining us and listening. Okay, so what would that billboard say? Or what would the essence of that be? Essentially, it would be.
You just went muted for a second. Do you mind? Yeah, restart that.
Sure. So essentially, it would be, I think things I've already said a little bit. So you're part of an amazing adventure right now. This is a creative, purposeful moment, and you're part of a big human family that has lots of incredible qualities and a lot of stuff that needs to clean up and sort out in itself. But there's a big, incredible moment that you're part of. You're invited to be excited about that and feel the goodness alongside all the mess and the craziness. We don't have all the answers clearly understood, and it's not a neat, clean thing. That's okay. It's going to be a confusing journey. That's okay. Let's not be scared of doing that. Let's not be scared of starting to link up the dots. Let's not be scared when we can't get a nice, crisp answer to this is what we do. Let's strive for that, for sure. But and let's also see. This is getting a bit airy-fairy, but this is what I would say as starting points. Let's remember how beautiful the world is outside us and channel that into what we're doing, and start to see the connections all around us and embrace those and break down barriers. So instead of thinking of things in boxes and separate to each other, let's understand how things interrelate and start to go down that path. And the final thing is I'd offer or an invitation really to help write this narrative. Where do we stand right now, and what do we need to change specifically? Let's get a story that we can put together, which doesn't have to be perfect, and not everyone's going to totally agree on the details, but let's get a bit of a vision together, like the Green New Deal is starting to offer, like sustainability and renewable ideas are, like Indigenous perspectives have said for millennia. Let's coalesce that together and rally around that, and then let's go for it and create and build that world. So that specific story, I think, is like really energizing, and it's already starting to emerge all over the place. We just need to keep bringing it together. And this is the moment. This right now is a moment where this can take a real leap forward. So COVID is a crisis, obviously, but it's a moment for us to retake. We're going to be spending lots of money and rethinking how we approach things as well. It's not all about money, obviously. This moment is now.
Yeah, man. It's certainly a time for reflection. I think you touched on some absolutely interesting things that I totally, at least they resonate with me. You were just talking, and there's two concepts in there that I think we have to unpack, maybe with someone else that can help us go through that. You look like it's okay. It reminded me of Wim Hof talking on his respirations sort of classes, or his breathing meditation classes. He said, it's okay, your body's tingling, it's okay. And it was exactly the same tone. But I mean, there's two concepts in there that are very complicated, I think, for us as a society, and one of them is our mortality. It's almost like we have to detach ourselves from that, from the stress that causes us, the fact that we're going to die, like we're all going to die. And that's a really tough thing to unpack. I think for everyone, even if we sometimes deny it. And the other one is the uncertainty. A lot of people, and I think we're both very outdoorsy people, and I think outdoorsy people have a much better ability, because in a way that's exactly what we search in our pursuits. We search that unknown and the uncertainty of the result, and it's almost like we thrive on that, or we enjoy being on that discomfort. It's actually quite an excitement, which actually leads into what you suggested. We need to try and see this more as an adventure and something we embrace, and we enjoy the process. And it's just a tough concept, and I think I needed to probably interview someone here that helps us, sort of go deep down. I kind of think of someone that might help us with that. I was having a conversation about that yesterday of someone I want to bring here. The mortality, I don't know who to talk with yet, but if someone has a good suggestion, fire away, and I'll try to get them here and see if we. That would be a very interesting topic to break down.
And I'm sure. Just to note, like, there's probably I'd imagine myself also an interest in like specifics, but what does this look like? And I can offer some links about what the Green New Deal and sort of frameworks of like, what do we actually do to build a regenerative community, civilization, etc. What does that look like in terms of stuff we do, as well as mindsets we enable ourselves to grow into? So I'm happy to provide a few links to that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, fire away. Anything you put in there, I'll make sure it gets copied I'll compile it all in the description. Right, I guess this is it. I'm sure me and you will have a lot of conversations about this. I mean, I'm sorry to everyone that tuned in, and the experience might not have been like as perfect as we were trying, but still we had a bunch of people that seemed to have stayed till the end. So that's pretty cool already. Could have been just me and you, Dave. Yeah. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much to everyone for tuning in into The Answer is 42. And stay to the end. If this made you all smile, if this had any value to your lives, like to make this, it only makes sense, I guess, if a lot of people are looking at it or actually taking some value out of it. Otherwise, me and Dave can just have these conversations by ourselves. So help share the final video, subscribe to the YouTube, even if it didn't work this time, but it will work next time. Leave a like, leave your comments, leave your suggestions to improve it. And yeah, thanks for tuning in one more time. My next guest is already set, and it will be Jin Ong on the topic actually of sometimes we need a big crisis to actually ignite some momentum and ignite some change. And I think a lot of us are going through this. This is a product of that. Jen is in the middle of all the chaos. Is also going through a lot of this, and so she's really good at not fluffy talk and actually being very specific about how to do it and what to do it. So no pun intended here, Dave. I think there was definitely some clear advice in what we were talking, but it is a very difficult concept to grasp, systems thinking. So I'm really stoked we took a bit of time to just dive deeper. And that's it. Till next time, keep creating value in the world. Peace to everyone. And thanks, Dave. It was awesome to have you, man.
Thanks heaps, Pedro, and thanks everyone listening that came along. It's amazing to think that people are actually keen to engage and offer support for this sort of enterprise and spark ideas in the world. Awesome.
Yeah, let's spread the concept of systems thinking and share it with a couple of people more around the world. All right, that's it. I'm going to cut this out. See you around next time, Tuesday, 10:30. You can come back. See ya.